Daddy, would you like some sausage? Daddy, would you like some sausages? Daddy, would you like some sausage? Sausages, sausages. The sausage is one of the most ancient dishes in the world, found on nearly every continent and culture in some loose form. It's also Riley Reid's favorite food. Humans, being animals, like to eat, well, other animals. The fat and protein provided early humans with the calories needed to fuel our large brains during our evolutionary history. This is not an argument for gorging on hot dogs that would probably shrink your brain and massively increase your guts. Now, long before refrigeration, meat would spoil quickly, and in an age of scarcity, humans would innovate methods of preserving meat for longer periods of time, along with using parts of the animal that were not as appetizing. Meat scraps, blood, and organ meat, along with other animal products that belong to a dog food processing plant or the school lunch menu, were oftentimes used for the processing of sausages. Obviously, they didn't have dog food or kids' lunch menus, but you get the point. These were oftentimes preserved in salt. Salt absorbs the moisture needed for bacteria and fungi to spoil the food, and therefore preserves it for a longer period of time. Another part of the animal's body used in the sausage making process was perhaps the least appetizing, but nonetheless the most efficient and resourceful: the intestines, the highway of shit. Leftover parts of meat could be grilled up and fitted into tubes to produce sausages, and with some salt curing, they could be preserved for long periods of time. The first civilization to have mentioned sausages were the ancient Sumerians. They even had their recipes written out on tablets. Further to the east in China, a part of the world Westerners don't typically associate with sausages, actually has an incredibly old and rich history of sausage making. Chinese sausages typically use Szechuan peppercorns and ginger heavily, both of which imply flavor and, to a lesser extent, preserve the meat. By the early modern age, Chinese migrants would spread their sausage making techniques to Southeast Asia. Pork is widely eaten in China, and so smoking and dry aging pork for preservation was widely practiced. At some regions in Southeast Asia, there was widespread adoption of Islam, and therefore pork was oftentimes replaced with beef, goat, lamb, and other meats. In the Philippines, contact with the Spanish Empire brought them chorizo. To this day, the Filipinos incorporate sausages into their cuisine, probably more so than any other East Asians, possibly due to a prolonged contact with Europeans who by and large were more interested in sausage making. Speaking of Europeans, sausage making techniques were recorded by both the Greeks and the Romans, usually in the form of blood sausage, which is boiled to a degree, dried, and then mixed with some ingredients like oats to solidify it, and then fits into an intestine. The Italian peninsula would be one of the great purveyors of sausages, usually in the form of pork. One of the earliest varieties was Lucancia, which I'm mispronouncing, a dried pork sausage that to this day is eaten across the Mediterranean. It was here when fennel seeds were first combined into the mixture. Fennel is a Mediterranean herb with a strong floral smell, kind of similar to anise, but not as bitter and strong. In the Western palate, fennel is oftentimes associated with sausages. Get a non sausage pack of meat with high fat content, add some fennel seeds, and try it yourself. Italians living in warmer climates were also able to grow some more mild versions of chili peppers imported from the Americas, resulting in spicy Italian sausage, the most famous of which would be certain forms of salami. This involved meat which was fermented, hence the slightly acidic flavor, then air dried, hence its preservation. During the decades during and after Italian reunification, many fled to the United States, namely New York City, and mixed the tradition with other ingredients, namely red bell peppers, spicy peppers, and others, to produce pepperoni, the most iconic of American pizza toppings. Central Europe would emerge as one of the most famous regions of sausage production, in which Germany would later emerge to produce the bratwurst, made of pork in typical circumstances, dating back to the Roman era, when the first formations of Germanic peoples were really coming to place. Today, there are countless regional varieties of bratwurst with different herbs and secondary ingredients, but usually the same sort of meat content, which is finely ground. Different regions of the Germanic world would have their own spin on the brat, such as the Ulma brat of Switzerland, using onions, leeks, celery, as well as other ingredients that have been incorporated from warmer climates, such as lemons, cardamoms, and nutmeg. To the east in Poland, they would produce the iconic kielbasa sausage, which comes in a variety of different animal meats, both fresh and smoked. That also has this cool shape. Like the Germans, the Poles would migrate en masse to North America and bring their sausages with them. Now, I will skip over some of the culinary monstrosities of the British Isles, and namely Scotland, which is just kind of like coagulated organic matter fit through a tube. I mean, just look at this thing, and turn to the Iberian Peninsula. Spain and Portugal are famous for chorizo, iconic for their bright red color due to the paprika and other pepper spices. They are usually fermented, cured, and smoked. They exported this method to the Americas and came across chili peppers, which they incorporated into their own sausage making methods, making them spicier. Mexican chorizo, however, is by and large of the fresh variety and includes Western Hemisphere ingredients like more chile and tomatillos. Argentina, with its vast, perfect land for livestock, would also be a major producer of meat and especially sausages, combining Spanish and Italian techniques of sausage making. And speaking of sausages, we have, well, the Americans. I must discuss the infamous American hot dog. Burst out of, in my opinion, two of the worst varieties of sausages. There's the Vienna sausage, a thin parboiled case of meat, oftentimes canned and bland, as well as the Frankfurter, a German parboiled sausage made from sheep intestines, which ended up producing the worst of all, the hot dog, which unfortunately is the most widely eaten. With poor Germans mass migrating to the US during the 1800s and the beginnings of industrialization and mass production, the hot dog would become the American apotheosis of evil of two lesser German and Austrian evils, an insult to the history of sausage making. They were cheap and they could be mass produced and were quite popular among working class urbanites. And stands proliferated across New York City and other cities in North America. Chicago probably has the best variety. This style is topped with peppers, onions, mustard, relish, and never ketchup. Hot dogs are famed for their nutritional value, or more accurately, lack thereof. They take the ancient custom of meat production and preservation to an extreme level, with the use of sodium nitrite, which is a carcinogen, but at the same time, these methods do keep sausages alive. Well, not alive, although maybe they are alive, but who knows, but at the very least preserved for a very long time. I think that a sausage probably wouldn't expire for about a few thousand years if it's a hot dog or anything similar. Today, the hot dog is a cultural icon of the modern age. Its efficiency, longevity, and mass-scale production, as well as its artificiality. It takes all the ancient customs of sausage making to their logical conclusion. But hey, maybe vegan sausages will take over, and we'll get a mass vegan sausage/hot dog revolution, so long as they manage to find a way to not make them taste like coagulated sand in a tube. Thanks for watching.